Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we have plenty, and I mean plenty of football to talk about today, as yesterday was the NFL's roster cutdown day. Tons of players were released around the league. Tons of little trades were happened. Tons of signings happened. All sorts of weird things happened yesterday, so we're going to break it down. So why don't we sit back, relax, sip our coffee, and enjoy the show. And just a quick shout out to my girlfriend Madison. In spirit of the pumpkin spice latte hitting the shelves at Starbucks this week, they finally brought it out. It's fall season. We've been making our own pumpkin stuff, little pumpkin foam. She makes a little pumpkin creamer. You get some like pumpkin pie filling, I think, and then like kind of puree it, mix it around, makes a nice little foam. You throw it into your coffee. It's tasty. It's fallish. It's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. Highly recommend checking that out. Shout out to you, Madison. I know you're not watching. I know you're at work, but still, thanks for the coffee this morning. Thank you. Let's go ahead and talk about some football. Before we get into the roster cuts, we've got to talk about, some of just the big news in general. We're going to start things off with one of my favorite happenings so far this offseason, and that is the landing spot of Trey Lance on the Cowboys. Basically, just a quick little update on it. Yesterday, he had a little bit of a press conference, little interview thingy going on, and he was asked just how happy he is to be on the Cowboys, and he said, "When I heard Cowboys, I had a big smile on my face." He went on to say he's 100% healthy, and then went on to say that Dak Prescott welcomed him with open arms, and that they have a ton of respect for each other. So I'm excited to see how this relationship can grow. I do think that it is a really, really good landing spot to try to get back on your feet for a player like Trey Lance, who basically the team lost all confidence in him. He was not really given a fair shake at all. And now he gets to go to one of the greatest franchises of all time with a good quarterback ahead of him, a nice little head coach, all of that fun stuff. So I'm excited to see what Trey Lance can do. It's going to be a couple years unless Dak Prescott gets hurt, but still, I think it's a great way for him to kind of hit the reset button and try to, capitalize on that third overall draft capital he received just a couple years ago. Updates on Jonathan Taylor as well. Yesterday, as we know, we kind of talked about the rumors that he'd be traded. It was, who was it that was actually ended up being right? I know it was Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter had differing opinions about what would happen. I think it was Schefter who said he wouldn't be traded. I'll have to go back and watch, but I'm pretty sure it was Schefter that was like, I don't think Jonathan Taylor's going to be traded. And Rappaport was like, yeah, I do think he will be traded. So looks like Schefty yet again is the guy to watch, as Jonathan Taylor will be remaining on the PUP list, will not be traded, is sticking with the Colts as far as we know right now. That means he will be missing the first 4 games of the season. His value is going to go down. his value is going to go down plain and simple. So you tune into Wake and Take to get the takes about what you need to do about happenings around the league. And I would say with Jonathan Taylor, you've got to hold. No one's going to pay up for him, even really in dynasty leagues. The only big trades I've seen happen for Jonathan Taylor since this news were ones that were left inbound. So if you've sent out some offers for Jonathan Taylor, maybe go withdraw those because you could definitely get him a little bit cheaper now, probably. But if I roster him, I'm holding him. It's only 4 games. And as you guys know, I'm fine with Jameson Williams. I'm fine with Alvin Kamara, even seasonally, with those types of suspensions. So to see him only missing 4 games, more than likely, maybe a couple more, depending on how this injury develops. But I'm holding on to him. I don't think you can get enough of a return for a player of Jonathan Taylor's caliber right now on the trade market. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. People are going to be too scared to pay up for him. So you've just got to hold on to him, but be happy because it's Jonathan Taylor. You have one of the best running backs in the league. Yes, it sucks. Yes, you're going to go off to a rough start, but still it'll be okay. And when he returns, you'll be happy. So the backup running backs, let's talk about them now. Yesterday, I said I really have no idea how it's going to shake out. I believed, that if they did move on from Jonathan Taylor, they already had a contingency plan in place. That was kind of, to me, evidenced by the Kenyon Drake release. If you're going to release Kenyon Drake, you're either A, expecting Jonathan Taylor to be back, or you have someone else on the table ready to come in, because you're not just going to roll out with Evan Hull and Deion Jackson and Zach Moss when he returns from the injury. But that is probably what they're going to do with Jonathan Taylor staying with the team and being on the PUP list. The first 4 weeks of the season will be Evan Hull and Deion Jackson and Zach Moss based on when he recovers. Who should you choose? And this is where I hate having to choose between a committee of backup running backs on an offense led by a rushing quarterback. It's just, to me, not worth trying to decipher. If I had to pick one, right, I'm going to go with Deion Jackson. And that's only because we've seen him have success and he's familiar with the system. And it's the first 4 weeks of the season. Had you asked me this question later on in the year, I might go with Evan Hull as he starts to learn and get a little bit better. But I think since it's the first, few weeks of the season, they're going to roll with the guy who's been with the team, the guy who had a 10 target, maybe 10 catch game last year. I remember it being pretty impressive and having some good performances. That's probably who they'll lean on the most. Will Evan Hull still get some opportunities? Yes, but I think that Deion Jackson is probably the one that if you're going to choose to start one for fantasy football, you should probably go with Deion Jackson. I would probably say don't start either. I would probably, the only Colt player I'm starting week 1 is going to be Anthony Richardson. I'm not confident in starting Michael Pittman. I'm not confident in starting Jelani Woods. I'm not confident in starting Alec Pierce. Of course, the only Colt I am starting week 1 in fantasy football will be Anthony Richardson. And that's just because of the rushing floor he's going to provide. Everyone else, it's just, it's too many concerns, too many question marks. You can't be confident to start any player on this offense week 1. So I'm excited to see how it shakes out because I do think there will be some value here once we know. But I'm just not comfortable taking a chance on any of them right now, at least early in the season. But again, for backup running backs, I'm going to go with Deion Jackson if you're looking to start one. And if you own Jonathan Taylor, just keep holding on to him because you're not going to get a fair market value. Next up, I just want to talk about Will Lutz because he's one of my favorite players in the entire NFL. His dad was my 8th grade science teacher. We went to the same middle school, the same high school, the same college. So I'm just a big Will Lutz guy. I got a little worried. I thought he was released by the Saints, but then I saw it was actually just a trade. He got traded to the Broncos, and I just wanted to talk about it because I think that's an amazing landing spot for him. Historically, Broncos kickers have been successful for fantasy football, but also if the offense is taking a step forward, like plenty of us do expect him to, Will Lutz will be a very, very valuable kicker. He was going at the end of drafts, but he's one of those guys who can hit those 50, 60-yard field goals. And even if the Denver Broncos offense doesn't get much better, that means it'll probably be more field goal opportunities if they're not scoring touchdowns. So I think Will Lutz is a sleeper pick for number 1 kicker in fantasy football for 2023. I like the landing spot. And of course, I love the guy, Will Lutz. Another fun little trade that happened, Albert O was sent to the Eagles, and I'm also a huge fan of this one. When Dan Arnold was sent to the Eagles, I had been scratching my head. I never did it, but I had been scratching my head. I was like, you know what? That might be a good pickup in some deep leagues, some tight end premium, deep leagues, 2 tight end leagues, whatever you want to call it. Because Dallas Goedert has yet to play a fully healthy season within the league since he's been here. And, it's the Eagles, right? I mean, you want to get yourself on the Eagles offense however you can. So I love this landing spot for Albert Okuegbunam. He just had a 100-yard and a touchdown in the final preseason game of the year. The Eagles gave, I believe, it was a 5th-round pick for him and a 7th. So it's, technically not a lot, but still, I mean, a 5th-round pick is nothing to sneeze at. If Dallas Goedert goes down, I mean, we know the athleticism that Alberto has. I mean, I can't imagine he doesn't succeed in the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And, sometimes you just need a fresh place. And I like it, right? I mean, you're going to be tight end 2 on the Eagles now. It doesn't really get much better than that as a backup tight end, unless you're on maybe the Chiefs or the Ravens, but then you're fighting with Isaiah Likely. So great landing spot to me for Albert Okuegbunam. If you're in a league where it makes sense to roster a backup tight end, I would definitely be doing it in this case because, again, Dallas Goedert has health concerns, and Albert Okuegbunam, as we say year in, year out, is one of the most athletic tight ends in the league. At some point, he'll hit. I think he's going into year 4 now. So hopefully it's now on the Eagles. We'll see, right? We'll see. And another fun little move, Myles Gaskin was released by the Dolphins and then earlier this morning signed with the Vikings. And this comes after the Vikings released Dwayne McBride as well. So now the running back room is Alexander Mattison, Ty Chandler, Myles Gaskin. Myles Gaskin has been successful with limited opportunity within the league and has had some pretty explosive games. He's just a gadgety type player, a little shifty guy. I would say I'm a little bit concerned for Ty Chandler with this scenario. I think that they're very, very similar players and, they could eat into each other's workload. But since Ty Chandler's been with the team longer and already is with the system and everything, obviously Ty Chandler's going to be the RB2. I think Myles Gaskin is a little bit more of an insurance option, maybe some special teams play. We'll see. But mostly, I think this boils down to the Vikings wanting a cheap running back to fill out the running back room. Not named Dwayne McBride. They wanted a little bit more explosive of a weapon, not a true downhill runner. They wanted a Gaskin, if you will. So that is all I have in terms of updates. Let's just go ahead and check out these cut downs that happened. Every single team released some players. I'm only going to give you guys the offensive ones. Oh, wait, no, I had some other stuff. Where are my overlays? Doesn't matter. All right, just real quickly, I have some backup running back news. Jerome Ford is back at practice. This comes after Pierre Strong was sent to the Browns. Jerome Ford was like, I'm not sitting back anymore. I'm healthy. I'm good. I'm going to go practice because I don't want to lose this backup job. So good to see him back at practice. I hope he can continue to perform well and impress the coaches because, I mean, he's a good athlete. And I would like to see, him as the RB2. If Nick Chubb goes down, either him or Pierre Strong will definitely be fantasy relevant, maybe both. But it's good to see him back at practice. And also officially, the Buccaneers have named Sean Tucker as the backup running back to Rachaad White. So definitely roster him if you roster Rachaad White. I'm sure Sean Tucker will get volume already, right? I mean, he's the backup running back. It'll maybe be like a 25% type of thing. And then, of course, if Rachaad White goes down, that's so much volume for him to be had. So Sean Tucker, definitely worth rostering. Maybe worth sending out some feeler offers. Maybe see if you can get him for like a 3rd rounder or some stuff like that. But Sean Tucker, the official backup running back on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, let me see if, let's see. I'll answer this question before we get into the cutdowns. Jeremiah, Ty Chandler still the man to hold? Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, just keep holding on to him before we see what kind of usage happens. The beautiful thing, and I'm just going to give a quick little strategy thing here as we are nearing, drafting season. If you haven't drafted yet, still have some leagues going on, or maybe looking how to fill out your bench space, what I love to do is take some players that have, lots of high upside or maybe an unclear role, but a potential path to something that could be a lot of volume, or you're unclear how they're going to be used. And, also the potential is rock bottom as well. Like it could be rock bottom, like some players like this, like Tyquan Thornton, Calvin Austin, stuff like that. Those types of players I love to roster this time of year because week 1, week 2, week 3 at the latest, you will know if you can cut bait. And one thing that is so important in fantasy football is being able to churn your roster, replace players, move back and forth. And some of these running backs, like a Ty Chandler, for example, is one of those because, you'll see how he's used week 1, you'll see how he's used week 2, and then you can go from there. You can be like, okay, you know what? He's not really the 3rd down running back that I wanted him to be. He is a handcuff. And there's a bunch of other handcuffs on the wire. I'll go take a chance somewhere else. That type of thing. Basically what I'm saying is, roster people that you'll be okay with dropping within 2 weeks. Don't try to get like the Sean Tucker's of the world, really, because, he's a rookie. You're going to have to hold on to him. You're never going to feel comfortable. You think that an injury is going to come, all of that stuff. You want people that you don't want clogging up the bench, essentially. So go take your random flyers. I think Ty Chandler's a good one, just to kind of see what kind of usage these players have. And then, you can just cut bait really, really quickly. Let's look at these cut downs. A lot of these are, we're going to do a fun game here. It's early in the morning, but who cares? Every time I name a player that you had no idea still played in the NFL, take a shot, take a sip of coffee, whatever you find fun, because there's some names on here that I thought were pretty interesting. I had no idea they still played. Also, I'm only doing offensive players. A ton of players are cut down, tons of relevant defensive players as well. But for this list, I'm just going through mentioning the players on offense who are quasi fantasy football relevant. Some of these guys weren't really fantasy relevant at all, but also were names that we all know and remember. And something to keep your eye on. Some of them I'll have long explanations. Some of them I won't. But let's go ahead and get right on into this. And we'll start things off with the NFC East. The Cowboys did end up releasing Malik Davis. So that means Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn are the running backs to own on the Cowboys outside of Tony Pollard. Unfortunately, those of you like me who held on to Malik Davis from last season, picked him up thinking, we've got a nice handcuff going into the next year. You don't. He sucked. The Cowboys didn't like him. Malik Davis is gone. And I doubt he ends up really somewhere else if you're going to be released in that kind of situation. The Giants released James Robinson. They released Cole Beasley. They released Jamison Crowder. Those former two were actually terminated, just completely terminated, whatever that means. But they are all gone. I think we already kind of knew about James Robinson and Cole Beasley and Jamison Crowder, but still just players that were released. I'm going through. No big takeaways there. The Eagles. Also, no huge takeaways here, but one of their preseason darlings, Trey Sermon, was released. I'd kind of hyped him up a little bit this week. I was thinking, maybe it'll hit because, it took him forever to be good at Ohio State. And even then was only good for a couple games. And, he had a good little preseason run. So I thought that they might want to put him on the practice squad. But no, he's been released. They also released track star Devin Allen and Freddie Swain, which is one of the first names I had no idea was still playing football. Freddie Swain. I'll take my sip. The next team in the NFC East is the Commanders, who actually ended up releasing Derek Gore. You'll remember I had talked about him saying, he's familiar with Eric Bieniemy, had a pretty decent preseason. I could see him kind of sneaking onto the roster, but no, Derek Gore has been released by the Commanders. So it's going to be Chris Rodriguez, Antonio Gibson, and Brian Robinson filling out that running back room. Let's go ahead and move on to the NFC North. Quarterback Nathan Peterman was released, meaning Tyson Bagent, the rookie, has won the backup job. He had a good preseason, good camp, and a good Senior Bowl as well. He was Cody Carpenter's all-Senior Bowl quarterback, the only one he felt was good. So here he is winning the backup job in Chicago. They might bring in someone else as well, but Tyson Bagent is the quarterback they kept behind Justin Fields. And Treston Ebner was actually released. Running back Treston Ebner was released, which is definitely interesting because he was kind of like the most pass-catchy running back on this Bears team, which means, really floodgates are about to open for Roschon Johnson because Deontay Foreman and Khalil Herbert aren't doing that. Roschon Johnson will be. Go get yourself some Roschon before it's too late. The Lions, this one is really surprising to me. They are rolling out with only 2 running backs from what I can tell, as they have released Craig Reynolds, Jamar Jefferson, and Benny Snell, which is just surprising to me. I can't think of any other running backs. I thought Craig Reynolds was a lock to make the roster. He had been with them for a couple of years now and looked pretty good in the preseason, has filled in admirably every time he was asked to. So to see him released is pretty interesting. So it's just David Montgomery and just Jahmyr Gibbs right now. No RB3. We'll see how that develops. The Packers, Lou Nichols, undrafted running back, was released, which means Emmanuel Wilson, as we've talked about time and time again now, is the RB3. The handcuff to roster for the Packers is Emmanuel Wilson. And finally, for the NFC North, they released running backs DeWayne McBride and Abram Smith. This was the Vikings, which sucks. I'd kind of been hoping DeWayne McBride could turn into something. He was a really, really good college rusher, led FBS and rush yards last season, and landed in a great landing spot. Tons of opportunity for him in the Vikings, but honestly did not look good in preseason. Didn't really hear anything out of camp from him. So Don't really know what's next from him. I think luckily for Dwayne McBride, something that he has that none of these other running backs really have is the fact he is a rookie and led the FBS in rushing last year. I'm sure he'll end up on someone else's practice squad, but I doubt it's a much better situation than he was in the Vikings. So I think unless he goes somewhere really special, it's probably end of the Dwayne McBride train already. Let's go ahead and move on to the NFC South, and we'll start with my Falcons. Unfortunately, one of my favorite sleepers, one of Godwin Igwebuike, was released, and he looked really good this preseason, looked great at camp, looked great at practices, but they just didn't have the room. The Falcons in particular were one of those teams that just had so many good players that they had to go ahead and release, especially on the defensive side. Lots and lots of kind of controversy here in Atlanta, especially on like the local sports talk. Like, who are you going to cut? Who do you get rid of? Because so many of the players are basically exactly the same. But on top of Igwebuike, which was really surprising to me, they also released good old JJ Arcega-Whiteside and tight end 4s and 5, Parker Hesse and Tucker Fisk. So those guys no longer on the team. The Panthers released wide receiver Shi Smith. The Saints released running back Darrell Williams. So it's just going to be Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams. And I think there's one other guy there now as well, while Alvin Kamara is suspended. And the Buccaneers. This is another coffee one. I don't think it's actually Ronnie Brown, but running back Ronnie Brown, who I had no idea was still playing football. He's not still playing football. This is definitely a different Ronnie Brown, but still running back Ronnie Brown has been released by the Buccaneers. And third-string quarterback John Walford was also released, showcasing that they do firmly believe it'll be Baker or Kyle Trask all season. They're not going for anyone else. It's going to be those guys. They are commanding the tank. And the final division within the NFC West. The 49ers released Chris Conley, Jeremy McNichols, and one more coffee sip for me, Willie Snead. Had no idea Willie Snead was still playing. No big takeaways here. I mean, Jeremy McNichols might have sniffed some fantasy rosters at some point, just given how the 49ers running back rooms always seem to shake out. But none of these guys were crazy relevant. Honestly, most of these guys we're talking about are not crazy relevant, but still for your deeper leagues, kind of important to know. I've already cut some of the players we named. I'm in a 32-team league. I cut like 5 of these guys, so kind of sucked. It was a big cut day for my 32-team league. The Seahawks released both undrafted free agent rookies, Roderick Thompson, running back, and wide receiver Matt Landers. No huge takeaways here besides the fact that Jake Bobo did make the roster. Really impressive preseason and camp. Excited to see what the Bobo can do going forward. The Rams released backup running back Royce Freeman. They brought him in as an insurance option, a little veteran presence. He's gone. Brett Ripien, backup quarterback, is also gone, showing that they believe in Stetson Bennett as the backup. And yeah. Now the Cardinals released David Blough. So it's going to be Clayton Tune and Josh Dobbs at quarterback, because they also released Jeff Driscoll and running back Tyson Williams, who a couple years ago was a kind of preseason pickup from the Ravens, no longer making teams, basically out of the league at this point. And that's it for the NFC. Let's go ahead and breeze through the AFC. The Bills, they released running backs Ty Johnson and Darrington Evans. So it's James Cook, Damian Harris, and I believe still Lat Murray are going to be their running backs. And speedy wide receiver Andy Isabella has been released. He's kind of been bouncing around. Unfortunately, just not making rosters. When he got drafted, he was somebody who was kind of exciting as a prospect, but, just has not panned out. The Jets, and honestly, the AFC, especially the AFC East here, had some very surprising cuts. The Jets cut Zonovan Knight, who was a huge waiver wire pickup last year, helped lots of fantasy football teams. And Zach Kuntz. Zach Kuntz was released. My favorite rookie tight end this year, released. The most athletic tight end in this class, had I think 2, maybe just 1, had a preseason touchdown. Didn't make the team. Curious to see what will happen with him. Hopefully, this is kind of a case of you've just got to see him clear the waivers, and then you can bring him in for the practice squad. I think Zach Kuntz at least has the athleticism to land somewhere else if it's not back with the Jets, but definitely a surprising move to me. The Dolphins released Robbie Chosen-Anderson and Kiki Cootie, another player I had no idea was still playing, and Myles Gaskin, as we already talked about, as well as Tyler Kroft, tight end Tyler Kroft, the Dolphins tight end room, still kind of interesting. Still not quite figured out. And the Patriots had some huge cuts, very surprising cuts. They only have one quarterback on the roster now as they released Bailey Zappi and Malik Cunningham. Absolutely surprising that both of these guys were released, especially Bailey Zappi, who filled in admirably last season, and the fan base loved him as well. Reports are now coming out that they expect to pick him back up if he clears waivers and put him on the practice squad, but still, really crazy to see. And Malik Cunningham, a preseason and camp darling. We thought that he would be a multifaceted type of player for the Patriots, do all sorts of things all over the field. Also released. Very curious. Excited to see where he goes. I'm definitely sure a team will take a chance on Malik Cunningham based on the hype that he was building. And also only having one quarterback, they're also only having two running backs on the roster. They're only rolling out Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott as they release J.J. Taylor, Kevin Harris, and Ty Montgomery. Incredibly surprising. I have no idea what they're doing here. Very strange. I guess that means they are completely sold on Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott handling it all themselves. I'm sure that Bill Belichick will come up with some random thing to figure it out, and I'm sure they'll eventually bring in a third running back if needed. But very surprising to see they're going so skinny in the quarterback and running back department. The AFC North, the Ravens released Melvin Gordon and quarterback Josh Johnson, as well as wide receivers Laquan Treadwell and James Prochet. So if you're rostering any of those guys, I guess you can go ahead and cut bait. I would say that this is the, I guess, the end of the line for Melvin Gordon. It was a good career, but this is now, I think, third team since the Broncos, second team since the Broncos, where he just can't really get it going. I think it's third. I know he had the brief stint with the Chiefs. This might just be second. Doesn't matter. It's probably over for Melvin Gordon. No one's taking a chance on him. No one's keeping him, unfortunately. The Bengals released backup quarterback Trevor Siemian, which is surprising to me. I really thought he would be the Burrow fill-in, but he's not. And unfortunately, this is sad. The Bengals released Mac Hippenhammer. Unfortunately, that is the end of the line for everyone's favorite football player, Mac Hippenhammer. Sucks to see him. If you were rostering Mr. Hippenhammer, you can go ahead and release him as well. The Browns released preseason darling Austin Watkins. PFF, all preseason team, Austin Watkins. They also released Demetric Felton, who had been a really good backup for the Browns the past couple years, as well as Anthony Schwartz, who has also kind of been with the team for a decent bit now, and Cade York. So the Browns really did make some surprising cuts. The big takeaway here is it really might be Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore have really earned some belief with this Browns team. And, they like Pierre Strong and Jerome Ford as their backups. They don't need Felton anymore. The Steelers went ahead and got rid of tight end Zach Gentry and running backs Xavier Valladay. So they're rolling with Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, and their tight end room also isn't changing too much. They're getting rid of Zach Gentry, though, who had been with, in the league for a while now. Unfortunate release, but, he just doesn't have it anymore. We'll move on now to the AFC South. The Texans released running back Larry Roundtree. The Colts released Kenyon Drake, Mike Strachan, Rashad Perryman, Pharaoh Brown, and Amari Rogers. The Jaguars released Snoop Connor, so they're still going to be rolling with Tank Bigsby, JaMychal Hasty, and Travis Etienne, and Dearness Johnson. The Titans didn't have any big offensive releases. We already know they had an incredibly shallow offense anyway. No one too big, but they did make a trade for Nick Folk, which is pretty cool, pretty interesting. So that's the South. Really no one too crazy here. The Broncos made a bunch of releases. Again, no one wild, but still Tyler Beatty, Marquez Callaway, Kendall Hinton, which I thought was surprising given what he's meant to this team and how much work he's put into them, but not that great of a player to them. Lil Jordan Humphrey, running back Tony Jones, and then to make up for trading for Will Lutz, they did release Brett Maher. The Chiefs are keeping Deneric Prince, but releasing LaMichael Pirine. They also released Lamar Jackson. So unfortunately for the former MVP cornerback, he's been released. And to go along with the sadness of Mac Hippenhammer, they did release Ty Freifogel. So another great NFL name released by a great NFL team. The Raiders released a bunch of running backs showing their belief in Zeus Zamir White, Darwin Thompson, Sincere McCormick, Damian Williams, as well as wide receivers Keelan Cole and Philip Dorsett. Raiders clearing house, really going narrow there as well, getting rid of the older players for sure, as they're kind of a rebuild squad anyway. And the Chargers, we talked about it yesterday, their big release was Max Duggan. They did let Elijah Dotson make the roster, so their really only big release was Max Duggan. Definitely surprising there. You'd think you'd give him a little bit more of a chance as a rookie, but you don't need 3 quarterbacks on the roster. They like Easton Stick, so he's out of here. That is all the kind of important releases. I know none of them were really, incredibly surprising or anything like that. Some of them were big, but I'm sure most of these players you didn't even roster unless you're in the deepest of leagues. But still, there's some important takeaways, as we discussed, just about how the team feels about some of the other players on the roster based on the releasing. For example, with the release of Godwin Igwebuike, the Falcons probably really believe in Cordero Patterson and all the other ones we talked about briefly as well. Now, let's see if we have any questions here. I see one real quick, and I think that's it before I get you guys out of here. What to do with Zappe in your deep Superflex leagues? Hold on to him because, like I said, it does look like he will be brought back onto the practice squad, which means he's still the backup quarterback. The Patriots just doing kind of a funky situation with it. But yeah, just hold for now. I mean, I think with a lot of these guys, I would hold. This is kind of just overarching. I think a lot of these guys, especially the ones that we did think were going to be something, I would hold. They probably will land on another roster. And that's when you can kind of, take a little bit of a debate. I mean, none of these guys are going to be wildly fantasy relevant, really, but they might be towards the end of the season as injuries pile up and stuff like that. So, I mean, for the most part, you can probably cut bait. But if there's any question, basically what I would say is if you're like, should I keep holding on to him or should I release him? Just hold on to him. Just hold on to him because who else are you picking up right now? I mean, it's a very, right now we don't know too much. You might as well stick with what you know and what you believed in this offseason and then see if they land somewhere nice. And then if you hate the landing spot, then you can release it. But, don't go too crazy yet. But that is all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was another fantastic episode of The Wake and Take. That was football. I was Jason. You guys were a fantastic, fantastic audience. You have a wonderful Wednesday and a fantastic rest of your week. I'll see you tomorrow on this Player Profiler YouTube channel, the Facebook and Twitter, as every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Have a good one. Peace.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.